emotional and or physical discomfort. And the stress essentially is our body's reaction to these different challenges or demands that we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives. Of emotional and or physical discomfort. And the stress essentially is our body's
sorry, there was a little bit of a blip.
A little bit of a delay.
Yeah, okay, let's try. So go on and just say that last part again about your body's response.
Yeah, so stress is fundamentally our body's reaction to those different challenges and demands that we're experiencing.
Okay.
So, does that make sense? So, for example, like, stress can manifest like physically or behaviorally. Like, it can manifest in the form of, sweaty palms, or it can manifest in being nervous, any sort of reaction to that change.
And then, like, are there triggers, or is it a normal thing? Like, why is our body responding in that way?
Yes, stress is absolutely normal, given the fact, especially now, given all of the different changes that we've been going through in our society, whether it's due to COVID-19 or whether it's due to the recent political changes. So naturally, we're going to experience some sort of reaction, and whether that reaction is positive or negative, that's really up to how our body reacts and responds to that. So, this change is more likely to lead to the stress that we're experiencing, especially when that change has, different consequences. For example, COVID-19 has fundamentally altered our lives. We've had to go work at home. We're not able to see our friends and our loved ones. We can't go do many of the recreational activities that we're so accustomed to doing, and sometimes we don't even think about doing. So when we've experienced this change in our day-to-day lives, that'll naturally react and they'll naturally respond in some kind of reaction. So it's completely normal.
Okay, and let's, I'm gonna share a slide here too that you put together. We always think of stress as something negative, right? Like that's the whole, all these feelings and the physical manifestations as being something bad for me. But you're telling us that maybe perhaps stress could be a good thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in short bursts, stress can, be a very positive thing. And an example of that is, whether you're at work or you're at school and, you're waiting to meet a deadline. I mean, a lot of people talk about how they enjoy having a little bit of pressure in order to get work done because it'll increase their motivation. And, these feelings of stress from whether it's work, school, our family lives, our social lives, that could be an indication of passion or a form of dedication towards a particular thing. I mean, it shows essentially that you really care about whatever it is that you're doing. And so you care so much that you want it to do well, that you want to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. But of course, that, dedication, that intense passion towards, a particular thing can have, negative long-term consequences if it's not addressed properly. And it can lead to, a couple of different health conditions, such as, like high blood pressure, such as ulcers. So it's very important that, when we do benefit from these short bursts of stress, that we're aware of the fact that these moments of stress need to happen in short bursts, and that we need to ultimately take breaks, or else that stress can manifest into something a little more pathological.
Yeah, so let's talk about what that stress can manifest into, because I know personally for me, yes, maybe we talk about that positive burst, like I'll get that adrenaline rush, but then I'm also like not sleeping or, all the other things that manifest. So let's talk about some of these physical, emotional, behavioral manifestations.
Yeah, so on the more of the behavioral and emotional side, stress can manifest in forms of irritability or trouble, staying focused or losing concentration. It can make you have memory problems or, kind of be extra forgetful in the moment. It could also lead to forms of compulsive behavior. I mean, so for example, is you're doing things and you don't even realize that you're doing it. It can also react in mood swings or, very drastic shifts in your personality. And also it can lead to increased worry and just general fear of maybe not getting things done, or maybe if you're experiencing a deadline, what happens if the work isn't good enough? And it can lead to, and that, that increased worry is also something that needs to be addressed and monitored, because that could lead to something a little more pathological. And of course, there's a lot of physical manifestations of stress, and those physical manifestations are ultimately known as the fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response is our body's reaction to any given stressor, any given change that's happening, where our body is either going to protect ourselves from it, or it's going to essentially make us want to run away from that change. So stress is our body's fight reaction to that, because our body is physically reacting to that moment while we're engaging in that moment. And that can manifest in ways such as heartbeat increases, your breathing gets faster, you may experience forms of muscle tension, sweating, headaches, you may be tired, you may be feeling fatigued. You may have difficulty sleeping, as you had said before, because you have all this adrenaline, you're constantly thinking about what it is that you're doing, or whatever it is that's causing you this stress. You're fixating on it and you can't sleep from it. And our body needs time to recalibrate. It needs time to decompress, and sleep is what does that for us. And lastly, it can also react in things such as an upset stomach or other forms of physical pain.
Got it. So then so if all these things are happening, what do we do?
Yeah, well, I guess the biggest thing, not the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things for us to do is to be able to recognize, that these things that these manifestations of stress are happening to us, but also ways that we can address this stress, ways that we can, manage our day-to-day lives while engaging in this stress. Because a lot of times the stress is not avoidable. I mean, the stress from work, the stress from school, that may not necessarily just go away, because
oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
because as I said before, schooling and your work, whatever it is that you're so passionate about, that's something that you want to keep doing. So how do we maintain that passion? How do we maintain that hunger while experiencing some more negative sides of that stress?
Yeah. So, for those of you at home, feel free to throw in the chat box, like things that stress you out, right? So, I'll go through some of the ones for me personally, right? Between, family, right? Having the kids, and especially being a part of the pandemic, we have all these different kinds of schooling. We have remote schooling, and some people have hybrid schooling, and kids' activities are shut down. Everybody's in a home together. Normal routines aren't being able to be followed, which keeps, and all that stuff snowballs. Personally, I'm even working from home and doing court hearings from home, and all these things that normally you leave the house to do and interact with other humans to do. We've kind of lost that human interaction, and the kids schooling from home, they feel stressed because they're in one environment, which creates a larger stressor on the family. What are other things? Like what, and you said school, right? For the kids, school is a huge stressor too. And for the people who are in college and maybe not being able to be at college while being in college, and not being able to experience life normally. But I would love to hear from some of you who are listening in. You can put into the chat box some of the things that are your stressors, so we can have Owen to help try to address different methods to deal with it. So you were talking about coping mechanisms, managing the stress. Should we be looking at positive stress differently and negative stress differently?
I think that you should look at them differently, because, positive stress, for example, that is something which, like I said before, can increase our motivation, can, increase sort of the adrenaline to succeed in whatever it is that we are doing. But, whereas this negative stress that we're experiencing, that can be something where where we have to address that more promptly, because, as I said before, that can result in maybe something a little more pathological like anxiety or
Give us an
depression.
example. Give us an example of a situation just to help.
Yeah. So a positive example of stress could be, other than schooling or other than school or work, it could be, maybe you're putting together a birthday party for one of your friends, and the person who you're getting the catering from, they canceled on you at the last minute. That's a form of stress that's not going to ultimately change who you are as a person, and it's not going to be something that can negatively affect you, but it's a change that that's a change that happened to you that needs to be addressed sort of right away. And reaction and change in general is something that's inherently stressful, but it's not a form of negative stress. It's actually a positive form of stress, because in this case you're ultimately able to achieve something that'll make you and your friend happy. But a negative form of stress could be procrastination, and a lot of times, especially me being in school, I've had friends say that they thrive off of doing work at the last minute because they work better from that increased pressure, that increased knowing that this deadline is approaching. But that can also negatively interfere with you, because you may be staying up late at night a lot and that you won't be able to get a good night's sleep. You may not have the time to decompress from your work because you're so fixated on the next assignment or the next project that you need to complete.
Yeah. So one of the questions we received, which I think is relevant right now, is it possible to change the negative stress into positive stress? Is that a possibility? Because that's what I need. Everything to me seems so like it's a negative stressor.
Yeah, and not to go too clinical or too technical, but there's a process that I use a lot with my clients. It's called reframing. And reframing is essentially known as, you're changing the perspective of which you're viewing a certain feeling, a certain action, a certain event. So, for example, if you're experiencing a form of negative stress, you can maybe reframe your mindset towards it by looking at it as maybe a form of motivation, where that this feeling of stress is not something that you want to experience. So I'm going to reframe it as a goal, as of mine, where I do not want to experience this form of stress, or I want to reduce the likelihood of me experiencing this form of stress, because as I said before, some forms of stress are unavoidable. So just looking at it in a more positive light.
Yeah. So
I know it's easier said than done, but I think that perspective shift is very beneficial and is shown to be very successful.
And I know you have some coping mechanisms for us, but before we get into that, I have one more question. So the question is, as our lives have dramatically been impacted from a social face-to-face interaction to now learning how to read visual cues, what are some cues to pick up? So maybe not having those visual cues, what are some cues to pick up on?
Yeah, I guess, one cue to pick up on is a person's tone of voice, because if a person may be speaking very fastly, or if a person may feel or may sound exasperated, that could be an indication that a person could be stressed. And if you have a good relationship with that person, maybe you can look out for them and ask, is everything okay? Are you doing okay? Is that sort of what you were getting at? I just wanted to clarify.
I'm sure if they wanted more, if whoever anyone that question, and they can type in more in the chat box.
Yeah.
So then this next question actually is perfect for what we're going into next, is what are ways I can properly cope with these kind of behaviors? So I can share again, so we can talk a little bit. All right.
Okay. So I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So one of these mechanisms I think you were sharing is mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about this. What is mindfulness?
Yeah. So mindfulness is a really, really cool technique, and it's something that anyone can practice at home. And it is the practice of purposely bringing one's attention to their experiences that are occurring at the present moment without judgment. So essentially what that means is you'll be focusing on whatever it is that you're experiencing and allow the thoughts associated with that experience, the sensations associated with that experience to flow freely and to just simply observe what those sensations are, what those feelings are in the moment of that activity. And it's a great, way, it's a great exercise to allow us to become more aware of A, how we react to stress, and also B, what activities or thoughts may increase or exacerbate this stress. And it's really important to note that, it's not something, and it's a very successful technique and it can benefit a lot of people, but it's, it's like a muscle where it's something that we need to develop over time, and it's something that we need to practice. And
yeah, what are some ways I remember I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I was at an airport and I bought a mindfulness coloring book because I had a 12-hour flight and some gel pens. And it was so nice to kind of purge my mind of all the stuff that all my worries and all the things that I'd been thinking of and all the to-do lists that I was making in my head, and just literally kind of take a page into my past and just color.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about that is that you were able to find something that allowed you to divert your attention away, not erase those worries, but just for that moment of time, just divert your attention to something that makes you happy, something that you were able to derive pleasure from, and see how you're able to respond to that. And it allows you to be able to engage fully with whatever it is that you're experiencing. Because so many times with what we're doing in life, we're thinking about 100 different things while we're engaging in what we're doing. But this coloring activity that you were describing, it allows you to focus solely on the coloring in that moment of time. And that's just...
No, I think that you bring up a good point. So I want to kind of switch back to that question that we asked right before we get into more of the mindfulness discussion. It says Zoom meetings versus in-person meetings, tough to pick up on body language or other visual cues. So it was visual cues. What should I be looking for on those Zoom meetings? Oh, that's a tough one because it's hard because you don't know on Zoom meetings. I know I spend a big chunk of my day on the weekdays on Zoom meetings, and you don't know if a person's actually looking at you. Are they checking their email on the screen while they're in this meeting? Are they fully engaged? Because to run a big group meeting. So what are things, so what she's saying is, what body language or other visual cues should I be looking for?
Yeah, or visual cues, or body language. One could be movement, or if someone's shaking around like this, you can tell that maybe they're a little agitated or a little anxious. Another example could be, and this is very, very nitpicky, but this is really small, but you can kind of see in somebody's glasses the glare or the lighting from the computer. So you can see if somebody's clicking on another screen, but that's of course more nitpicky. But in terms of visual cues, it's also so hard to make any definitive judgment about what you're seeing because you ultimately don't know what's going on at a person's house.
Yeah.
And you don't know, maybe they have kids at home, or and they have to be on alert. Maybe if they're young, they have to know always what their kids are doing. Maybe there's construction going on. Maybe there's a whole bunch of different things that could be happening. So while it is great to recognize these cues, it's also important to know that they're ultimately just cues and that they're not definitive statements about what a person may be experiencing.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not being in person is a huge disadvantage on that side. And that perhaps even kind of changing your mindset and not letting that piece stress you out, like worrying about the other person, as long as you yourself are being mindful and I guess procuring good etiquette on those video calls. I think that's as much as you can do in this situation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about mindfulness more. Do you think we should try doing the activity itself?
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun for everybody.
Okay. So I have the screen up there. I think I'm sharing the body scan activity. So go ahead and walk us through this.
Okay, so I think that a fun activity and a really beneficial activity for all of us is to actually try a mindfulness activity together. And this will take about 2 to 3 minutes. And this activity, and I'll read the instructions out loud to you. And so I want everybody to sit comfortably wherever you are, whether you're in your chair, whether you're in your couch, bed, whatever. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. So as you breathe in, as you breathe out, you'll close your eyes. And when your eyes are closed, for 3 minutes, I want you to notice how your body feels right now. And I want you to notice, and I want you to start at the top of your head and gently scan down through your body, noticing what feels comfortable and what feels uncomfortable. And it's important to remember that you're not trying to change anything. You're just noticing how each part of your body feels as you scan down evenly and notice each and every part of your body. Does that make sense to everybody? So essentially what we'll be doing is we'll all inhale together when I say so, and then as we exhale, our eyes will close, and then for 3 minutes, I want everybody to just notice how their body is doing. And it's important during the scan to just do it systematically, where start from your head and just start from the top of your head and notice how your head is doing, all the way down to your face, to your torso, to your legs, and down to your feet. And this activity will highlight the connection between physical discomfort and our emotional state, because it's so often that if we're experiencing a form of physical pain or a form of physical discomfort, that can affect our mood.
So are we going to do this together now, Owen? Because I started doing it when you first started talking about it.
Yes. I'm sorry.
My eyes
yes.
closed. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let's all try doing this little mindfulness activity together. And then, or is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I know questions are coming in, and we'll be sure to get to them after the activity. All right. So you walk us through it.
Yep. So on the count of 3, we'll inhale, and then as soon as you inhale for 4 seconds, I want you to exhale for 5 seconds. And then as you exhale, close your eyes and then start to think about your body. So on the count of 3, we'll take our inhale. 1, 2, 3. And then exhale, and close your eyes. And while your eyes are closed, start thinking about, how your body is feeling and those sensations. And it's also extremely important to, try not to judge yourself or, judge what those feelings are. Just to experience what it is and to just let it flow through you. Okay, if everybody is willing to open their eyes now.
Okay, so tell us about what we should have experienced right there.
Yeah, so for a body scan is a really great and helpful tool that just allows us to focus on any kind of physical discomfort that we're experiencing. Because a lot of times, when we're going through our day to day, especially if we're pretty busy or if we have a lot going on, we don't take the time to, I guess, notice how, for lack of better terms, how we're doing. And this activity allows us to focus on more of the physical aspects of stress. So, and then you can focus on different ways that, maybe we're experiencing kind of discomfort or we're experiencing stress. And it allows you to become, more aware of the thoughts that you're experiencing, in this case, as it relates to your body and how, maybe each particular part of your body that you experienced or that you were observing is feeling. And also it allows you to, take the time and slow down so that you don't so that you don't immediately react to what it is that you're experiencing, what it is that, you're going through. And it allows you to just, just focus on yourself and to focus on each individual thing that you're doing one at a time. And
So what about like what about your like mind, right? During this body scan? Because what I was noticing, and I think a lot of people will probably feel the same way, is my mind, like I couldn't get it to focus. Like I was thinking about things and I had to recenter. And this also happens a lot during like prayer, right? Where we really want prayer to be a focus on our communication with our creator, but like you can't help but think about like what you have to do next, or like, your Costco shopping list, or like whatever it might be, right? There's other things that your mind just keeps wavering off to and kind of bring it back. This almost seems like a good exercise in these like small timed moments to even kind of help focus your energies and even help you with prayer.
No, absolutely. I mean, these exercises are, a great way just to build and, practice being able to, refocus your attention, because it's easier said than done to say, oh, I want to focus solely on this, then I'm going to focus on this, then I'm going to focus on this, because we all have so much going on in our lives. And so these really quick exercises are just a way to build that, muscle, to be able to build that skill, to be able to systematically observe and react to what it is that we're experiencing.
So it like reduces stress, but do you think the same practice could our prayer in itself be a form of mindfulness? And has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of given us this set mindfulness routine into our day, but we're not acknowledging it as such?
Oh, 100%. I mean, prayer is, of course, the huge form of mindfulness where, our intent is, focused solely on communicating with Allah. And, being able to, do that is very difficult. And it's something that we're all striving to do. And it's something that if we're able to, try and do in our religious lives where, we're trying to focus solely on this communication, then maybe practicing it in our personal lives is a way to build that muscle so that we're able to also do it religiously in the form of prayer, in the form of reading Quran.
Yeah. And then that all kind of comes to us reducing our own stress, just to, put it all in a nice little package if we get to that point where we get that muscle memory and the ability to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to look to see if before we go on to the next piece. Let's continue talking about mindfulness and then we can go to some questions. So how often should you practice mindfulness?
Yeah, well, I guess, you practice it as much as you think that you feel as if it can benefit you. And for some people, they benefit from it if they do it every day and it's more of a regimented part of their lifestyle. And for others, maybe it's only during times of stress or it's during times of anxiety or times of change. So my biggest suggestion is that, it is something to at least try and see if it works for you. And if you derive any benefit from it, any benefit as minuscule as possible, then I would suggest, keep working on it, because ultimately, building this muscle and being able to identify A, when we're stressed, and B, how we're reacting to that stress. And also, being able to focus solely on those reactions is something that can immensely benefit us in the long run. But so it's really up to, the person to see how long, or, see how long it can benefit them. And there's activities, really quick activities that you can do, in the mornings to, try. It doesn't need to be something super duper regimented. It can be something as easy as, in the morning when you're drinking your tea or your coffee, during each sip, you focus solely on the sensations in your mouth when you're drinking either your tea or coffee. You're focusing on the flavors, you're focusing on the temperature, you're focusing on, how it's literally moving in your mouth. And these are really small, minute long, 30-second exercises that anybody can do just to try and build that muscle. But if you're doing something a little bit more regimented, whether it's or more structured, whether it's, this body scan that we were doing, whether it's other forms of meditation, whether it's, going for a walk, those obviously require more time. So you'll need to budget time out in your day to do those.
Yeah.
So as long as you need.
Right. And so I get adding things, right? And tell me if I'm jumping ahead to what you're already going to speak about, and I will stop. But I understand adding things, but is there anything we should be removing from our lives as well? Like adding things like mindfulness, adding these conscious activities. But is there anything we should be taking away, or am I jumping ahead?
No, you're not. No, you're not jumping ahead. But I think that, in terms of one thing to be aware of is, this connection between our physical health and our mental health. So if, for example, you're experiencing, immense forms of like lethargy, you're just feeling really lethargic all the time, or maybe you're experiencing, a lot of chest pains or a lot of, physical discomfort, that could be attributed to things such as your diet, or it could be attributed to maybe exercise habits of yours. And in that case, you may have to literally remove some aspects of your lifestyle, because that will ultimately improve your physical health, which could in turn improve your mental health and improve, your experiences of stress. Because, for example, maybe you have high cholesterol or high blood pressure that's attributed to certain foods that you eat, that can cause you stress, because, experiencing any sort of physical pain or any change in our physical lives, that's stressful. And also, other doctors say that we have high blood pressure. That can also be something that's scary, and that, worry can cause us stress, which will result in us having to literally remove certain things that we're eating or certain things that we're doing.
Got it. So how else? Like, what else can we do to reduce stress?
Yeah, so there's both short-term strategies that we can utilize and also more long-term strategies that we can utilize. And I'll talk about both of those. So a lot of short-term strategies, these are things that we can do, really quickly during the day that don't take up a lot of time, and that helps alleviate stress in the moment. So an example of this is a deep breathing exercise, or, going to take a walk, or other forms of physical activity, because it's been noted that exercise and other forms of physical activity, make us feel good, make us feel happy, and it releases this literal physical tension that we're experiencing.
So also, at that moment, you're actually feeling that stress coming on.
Yeah.
You take a break.
Yes, if you're able to, of course. I mean, in many situations, we're unable to take those breaks. But if you're able to take that break and you notice, okay, maybe this stress is causing me to experience some form of physical or mental discomfort, taking that break is a great way to, in that moment, alleviate that stress.
And then when you can't take that break?
Yeah, then when you can't take that break, you'll have to employ, I guess, more changes into your habits. So more, but you'll have to change your eating habits. You have to maybe make more time out of the day to engage in leisure activities of yours. For example, a lot of us derive pleasure from reading or from watching TV or watching movies. So if that reduces your stress in a real and fundamental way, and it genuinely makes you like happy, and it makes you it gives you motivation, that is something that we should try and make the time for. And it can be for any activity that makes us feel good, makes us feel better. And another thing that can make us feel better over time are positive self-talk habits. And this, what positive self-talk is encouragement is you encouraging yourself that you can achieve what it is that you're doing. Because so many times we tell our friends and our family and our loved ones that what you're doing is amazing, or we're congratulating them on their accomplishments. But it'll really help us if we are able to congratulate ourselves. If we're able to tell us that, oh, you're doing something really good right now, be proud of that. That can help somebody over time, because it'll increase your self-confidence. It can increase your self-esteem, and it can just really fundamentally help. And also, going off of that is creating realistic goals for ourselves. Because so many times we want to get as much done as possible to just to say that, oh, I've accomplished so much. But that results in burnout, that results in, just huge increases in stress that can ultimately, cause some sort of physical or emotional damage. So it's really important to, be aware of what goals we're setting, and to be kind to ourselves when we're setting those goals, and to understand that we're human, and that humans naturally make mistakes, and we're fundamentally not perfect. So to recognize that, and to just tell ourselves that we can do it next time. Or if we didn't achieve what we wanted to in this moment, we can maybe be able to examine ourselves and realize, how can we improve in the future? And that's something that mindfulness can really help you do. It really help you achieve, being able to self-identify how we're reacting in any given moment, to work on ourselves and to work on bettering those moments in the future.
I like that. So some of the questions we have are there ways we can include positive stress in our lives? Like, what are tangible examples of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so positive stress is, maybe playing sports, or maybe it's, and this is, maybe sounds a little silly, but, watching sports, for example. I mean, I was watching, soccer this morning, and, I know that I was getting, really, really upset, really, really stressed about the game. But, and that stress is coming from something that makes you feel happy. I mean, I'm watching, the soccer in the morning because that makes me feel happy. I'm deriving, pleasure and enjoyment from that. And even though in the moment I'm feeling stressed because we ended up losing the game, but after the fact, I was able to reflect on the idea that, watching soccer is something that brings me joy. And even though you're maybe feeling a little tense in the moment, you're getting jittery, your hands are sweating, those are forms of stress that you may experience in forms of real discomfort. And so being able to recognize that, this was stress that brought me happiness.
Yeah, and I think I can relate to what you're saying, because even when I play a sport, like I do different paddle sports and things like that, the competitive stress is actually like I want to win for my my team or whatever it is, but that stress actually results in a lot of positive physical manifestations, right?
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
and that is super, and that can provide a ton of motivation for you, both, of course, in what you're doing, but also in your personal and your professional lives.
Yeah, and you can even make that same kind of analogy to like, even when you're like cooking something, right? You want to make this,
Yeah.
this fancier dish, and that stress of getting it right, but that also that the process of the cooking being actually good for you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's hard. The act of cooking is hard because you have to get all the measurements correct, and you have to, and also the stress of not knowing if it's going to taste good. But when you're able to, taste it, know that you're able to do it yourself, and in the end, you were able to realize that that the stress turned into something beautiful and something positive.
Yep.
That's a really really beneficial thing and a really important thing that I want everybody to take away from this.
So another question we have is, and maybe you can understand this better than I can. So how can society raise its threshold in defining what stress is? So for example, a person gets stressed because they don't have butter for their bread versus another person who is delighted that he has bread to eat. So kind of our mental expectations, I guess.
Yeah, I guess they're the mental expectations, and also it's focusing on the nuance of what stress is and realizing that there's an indefinite amount of layers to how we react to stress and also how stressful something is. Because, in this example, a person maybe is stressed because they don't have butter for their bread. And that could be derived from the fact that they're so used to having butter with their bread that this change is that they're reacting to the change itself. Whereas the other person who's talking about just having bread to eat, maybe it's all about their mindset and what their expectations are. And it's, as you said before, it's the mental expectation of engaging in a particular activity.
Yeah. So so for example, I have a family member who anytime something horrible happens, I won't identify the gender, not call that person out, but they'll come to me and say, okay, here's what happened. He's like, he or she's like, find me a way to make it positive. Cause I try to always, perspective change, right? Perspective shifting. So, they'll bring me the worst case scenario, whatever's going on in their lives. And we'll go through this exercise where I make it sound like a good thing. Like, is there a way to shift your mindset to a more positive perspective? Or is that something that just depends on who you are and your surroundings? And
I think that, it's something that you can do, but it's not something that it's going to happen over time. I mean, similar to the mindfulness, it's something that we have to practice doing over time. Because of course, if you're feeling negatively about a certain experience, you're not going to automatically just, switch gears like that. But if you constantly tell yourself, oh yeah, what I'm doing is positive, what I'm doing is positive. If you keep engaging in this positive self-talk, both, talking from yourself and also from seeking help from others that are able to tell you, oh yeah, what you're doing is actually something positive, then yeah, you are going to be able to reframe that that mindset towards whatever it is that they're experiencing.
so just a reminder to everybody who is on the Zoom, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box to put forth any questions for Owen, and we'll make sure we get to all of them. I have a comment for you that says, Owen, thanks for stating that when you are stressed, you may have compulsive behavior and having behavior which are not normal. In reflection to you teaching us that, I can relate to it a ton. So that was a helpful comment on your part. So let's talk a little bit about, as we're waiting for questions to come in, let's talk about kind of our take-home messages, like things that we should really focus on. And I'll share that slide that you have given to me so we can share it with everyone at home. All right, it should be up now. Okay.
So I think the biggest take-home message and one of the biggest takeaways that I wanted to get from this session is to normalize stress and to have everyone recognize that it's an inevitable part of our work and our personal lives. Because as I said before, if we're experiencing, stress in some of these areas of our lives, it indicates a level of passion, a level of dedication and commitment to what it is that we're doing. So I wanted to highlight, and this goes also back to both the positive and negative stressors that we experience, and how we can leverage some of the stressors that we experience to increase our motivation or increase our desire to achieve our goals in life. And also that there's no right or wrong way to deal with stress. And it's important to do whatever works for you and whatever you feel comfortable doing. So for example, I shared the idea of using mindfulness and those techniques to alleviate stress because that is something that helps me. And that's something that I wanted to be able to share with you guys because I think that it could help others. But if it doesn't work for you, then it's important to admit that and to not, be stuck on trying or forcing something that you're doing because that can only exacerbate your stress. And also to be careful of letting extremely high levels of stress go unaddressed for long periods of time because that can result in more physical problems and mental problems that may require more immediate attention or more medical attention. And I think another thing to do is to make it a point to allocate time during either the day or the week, if possible, to engage in these stress relief activities that we know to be effective for us. So whether that's mindfulness, whether that's maybe watching a movie a week, whether that is, if possible, spending time with loved ones, with friends, recognizing that it is something that makes us feel good and that it reduces the stress that we're experiencing. And lastly, something that motivates us. I think, making a point to do them and to, take time out of the day is key. And I think that it's something that we should all try and do, if possible, of course. And last but not least,
Go ahead.
Oh, and last but not least is to pay attention to yourself and to pay attention to how you're feeling in how you're feeling in moments of stress, but also how you're feeling in any moment. Just maybe doing mental checkups, doing a physical examination, a quick check, just to see, okay, I'm feeling okay, or okay, I'm feeling a little stressed out, but I'm able to recognize where the stress is coming from. And lastly, is to be kind to yourself and to realize that we're humans and that humans are inherently imperfect, but if you're able to say that I'm working towards my goals, I'm working towards these tangible things that'll make me happy, that's something that should be rewarded and should be validated in us. So, and it's important to recognize that we're doing the best that we can with the situation that we've been dealt with especially regarding COVID and all the fundamental changes that have happened in our lives. And these are adaptations that a lot of us may not have thought we would have needed to make.
So stress relief activities, right? We talked about all the different stressors. A lot of us have loved ones who have either passed or are, dealing with trying to overcome COVID. So these stress relief activities, are these personal to the individual, or are there some that universally work if you try at them?
I think, it's ultimately it should be, whatever works for the individual. And I think, there are some universal techniques that do work, such as, exercise, for example. I mean, there's been a lot of, scientific studies that have supported the claim that exercise alleviates stress and can reduce anxiety and also increase general happiness and your mood. But for some people, that does not work for them. Maybe they're unable to exercise because of the physical pain that they're experiencing, or maybe they just don't like it, which is perfectly normal. But in that case, then you need to try and find things that work for you, activities or hobbies, or not hobbies, but just anything that you're able to derive kind of genuine pleasure from. Then it needs to become more individualized.
So what is the person who lacks the motivation to figure that out do? And when do you know that things have progressed to a point where you need outside intervention? So I guess that's a two-part question. One is the motivation.
Yeah. Well, the motivation, I think that if you notice that there's been a decrease in motivation, it kind of goes along with your second part where maybe you need to see outside help, because ultimately we do not want our motivation to diminish to the point where we cannot, I guess, engage in our day-to-day lives and do what we need to do and get that done. So if we recognize that maybe our professional lives have suffered due to stress, or maybe due to or anything that we're experiencing, maybe if we're recognizing that we're not seeing our friends as much as we want to, or our family as much as we want to, then if we're experiencing that, then maybe recognizing that we need to see outside, then if that happens, then we might need to see outside help, or we may benefit from seeking outside help only when things get that severe, to where we notice real, I guess, fundamental impacts in our lives that have big consequences.
Yeah. So as we are kind of wrapping up our session, the last thing, Owen has shared his contact info to anybody who would like to reach out to him, which I think is very generous of you. Thank you. But what are everybody's listening today? What are 2 things we can do before the day is out? What are 2 tips you want to give us that we should try tonight or this afternoon as a way to kind of start this journey on managing stress or being able to better make it positive or better cope with it?
Yeah, one activity, just because we're all here together and it's something that we can all do, is reflect on just the experience of this seminar, and just think about, and just reflect on, were you able to gain something from the seminar? Was it beneficial from you? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Just anything that you were able to experience or that you're able to take away from it without judgment. And that's the biggest thing that I want to stress, is whatever it is that we're experiencing, whatever thoughts that we may be going through, we don't want to judge ourselves for experiencing them. We don't want to, because we want to be kind to ourselves and recognize that, yeah, we're imperfect, and maybe that racing thoughts are a part of life. And and for this activity, if we're unable to maybe stay focused on the reflection, that's perfectly normal too. I mean, because we're human, and we always have a bunch of things going on in life. And another activity, just because I think that it'll be interesting, and also it's an activity that I mentioned earlier, is during dinner, or whenever you're eating something, just focus on how you're physically and reacting to eating. How is your mind reacting to the taste of the food? How is your mouth reacting to the taste of the food? How does the food literally feel in your mouth? How does it feel when you're swallowing the food? I think that these are really good activities and really helpful activities to build this insight muscle, like to build this self-insight muscle that we're able to hopefully utilize in other aspects of our lives. Because this insight is a tool that takes time to develop, and starting small with these activities is a great way to slowly develop it, and also to help us build tangible goals. Like, we don't want to engage in an activity where we may not be able to succeed in it, or where we just know that we're not going to be able to succeed in it. So just recognizing that in of ourselves is huge, and I think it can impact people in the long run in really profound ways, in really positive ways.
Well, I like both of those, because for those of you who signed up for the seminar, you'll be receiving a survey, so you can really reflect on what you thought about today's session and share that. So we'll give you something physical to do that with. And that whole mindful eating that you just talked about, another added positive to that is it also helps with weight loss, or like healthy way to be able to eat mindfully. So there's another added benefit to both of those things. Thank you so much, Owen. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing this wisdom with us. And hopefully many of us can take pieces of this and apply it to our own lives, and kind of help just get through the day with, positive stress, or being able to switch that, or just, being able to manage it in a way that it is positive for us. Any final words before we head out?
No, just thank you so much for letting me do this. I'm just really happy to be able to, share what I do with the community that's really kind of helped raise me, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, no,
So I'm really grateful for that.
it's really interesting to see the young people who have been raised by the community coming back and giving back. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. All right,
Yeah,
with
and
that,
of course, I put my contact information. So if anybody would like to reach out to me personally, please don't hesitate.
well, thank you to all of you who did tune in for listening, and inshallah, you will receive a survey from us, and we really do appreciate your feedback on these sessions so we can make sure we keep improving with each session that comes forth. So with that, I will close out. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Fi amanillah, and we will inshallah see you next month. Oh, next month, we are going to be having a session. I'm going to kind of preview it for you. We did talk a little bit about being on Zoom and our, not being face-to-face. And a lot of us still have to do, or either going into work or still have to do presentations, either as educators or in our workplace. So we have a wonderful speaker coming on next month who is going to be talking to us about effective presentation skills. So you'll get more on that via email and on the Baitul Ilm website. All right.